night isn't supposed to feel lonely on a college campus. You imagine parties spilling into the streets, music thumping through dorm walls, the smell of cheap beer and firecrackers drifting in the air. And most of the time, it's exactly like that. But I wasn't at a party that night in 2007. I was 24, in my second year of graduate school, and my evenings weren't about costumes and kegs anymore. I worked part-time at the campus library, mostly evenings, because I could study at the front desk between visitors. On Halloween night, the head librarian had left early, and I was the only staff member scheduled to close. The library was a massive old building, red-bricked and Romanesque, with echoing halls and tall windows that looked out onto the quad. During the day, it buzzed with students, but after 10 p.m., the silence thickened. The lights hummed overhead, pages rustled, and every footstep carried. By midnight, I was often the only one there. That Halloween, a cold drizzle pattered against the windows. The streets outside had gone quiet. The last stragglers in costume had drifted off toward bars or apartments. I sat behind the circulation desk, surrounded by a moat of books I was sorting, and told myself the emptiness didn't bother me. It did, though. Around 11:45, I heard the sound of the front doors creaking open. I frowned. Hardly anyone came in this late. When I looked up, a man was standing in the doorway. He wasn't a student, not even close. He was older, mid-40s, maybe even 50. His clothes looked wrong for campus, a long dark coat damp from the rain, trousers too loose around his legs, boots that scuffed loudly against the tile. His hair was slicked flat against his head, strands of gray shining under the fluorescent light. And his face, it was pale, almost gray, with dark circles smudged beneath his eyes. He smiled when he saw me. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was too wide, stretched too long, teeth yellow against his skin. "Evening," he said softly, his voice carrying across the empty hall. I swallowed and forced myself to keep calm. "Can I help you?" The man stepped inside, letting the doors sigh closed behind him. His eyes scanned the towering bookshelves, the shadowy corners, the upper balconies. His movements were slow, deliberate, like someone memorizing the shape of the place. "I was just looking," he said. "We're closing soon," I replied. My voice echoed more than I meant it to. "Library hours end at midnight." He looked at me then, really looked at me. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and when they fixed on mine, it felt like the bottom dropped out of my stomach. "Midnight," he repeated, as though he liked the sound of it. Something about the way he said it, savoring the word, made my skin prickle. He began walking slowly through the stacks, his boots clunking against the floor, not toward the study tables or computers, but deeper into the aisles, weaving between shelves, trailing his fingers along the spines of books. My pulse quickened. Nobody came here this late, and nobody who wasn't a student had any business wandering the library at this hour. I stood from the desk, trying to sound more authoritative than I felt. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." He didn't answer. I heard his footsteps vanish between the shelves, swallowed by the maze of books. The silence pressed in. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. I hesitated, then grabbed the phone on the desk. My thumb hovered over the keypad, ready to dial campus security. But then, his voice floated out from the stacks. "You shouldn't be here alone." It was spoken casually, almost conversational, but it chilled me to the bone. "I work here," I called back, my voice sharper than before. "This library is for students and faculty only. You need to leave." No response, just the sound of slow footsteps moving somewhere in the rows of books. I set the phone down quietly, then stepped out from behind the desk. My shoes clicked softly on the tiles as I made my way toward the stacks. Every instinct screamed not to go, but I couldn't just let him wander unseen. The shelves rose on either side of me, looming, lined with hundreds of old volumes that smelled of dust and glue. My breath sounded too loud in the silence. I moved between the rows, peering down each corridor, but the man was nowhere in sight. Then I heard it, the faint creak of floorboards above me. The second floor. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand gripping the rail. The stairwell seemed endless, shadows pooling at the edges where the bulbs had burned out. At the top, the reading area stretched wide and empty, tables lined up beneath tall windows that reflected nothing but darkness. He was standing at the far end, by the glass. His back was to me, shoulders hunched, head tilted as though he were staring at his own reflection. "Sir," I said, my voice tight, "you can't be here. I'm serious. You need to leave. Now." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he turned. His smile was gone. His face looked hollow, the skin stretched thin over bone. His pale eyes glimmered in the dim light. "I like places like this," he murmured. "Empty, quiet, easy to get lost in." Something in me snapped then. Fear curdled into anger. "Get out," I barked. My voice cracked through the silence like a whip. "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." For a moment, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he walked past me. His boots echoed off the floor as he descended the stairs, each step deliberate, unhurried. I followed at a distance, my chest tight, ready to bolt if he turned. At the front doors, he stopped. He placed one hand against the glass and looked back over his shoulder, his eyes locked on mine. That horrible smile crept back onto his face. "Happy Halloween," he whispered. And then he pushed the doors open and stepped out into the drizzle, vanishing into the night. I stood there, frozen, until the doors swung shut again. When I finally called campus security, they swept the building, checked the grounds. They found no trace of him. No one fitting his description had been seen entering the library on the cameras. The guards told me it was probably just some vagrant, someone looking for shelter from the rain. But I knew better, because after I locked up and gathered my things, I walked past the spot upstairs where he'd been standing. The glass of the tall window was smeared with moisture, and in the condensation, drawn by a fingertip, was a single word: stay. I never told anyone about this until now. Not my parents, not my girlfriend at the time, not even the guys I worked with at the pizza shop. I buried it, let it rot inside me, because saying it out loud felt like asking it back into my life. But it's been 20 years since that Halloween night in 2004, and still, sometimes, I wake up at 3 a.m, convinced I can hear rain pelting the windshield, see pale faces staring at me through the dark glass. My heart hasn't stopped racing since then. Back then, I was 22, I was broke, I was restless, and I thought working as a delivery driver would be easy money. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid. That night, the shop was slammed. Kids hopped up on candy, parents throwing last-minute parties. I was already tired when the boss handed me a mountain of boxes and an address I'd never heard of. "Big order," he said with a grin. 6 larges, sides, sodas. Tip will be worth the drive. He didn't care it was pouring rain. Didn't care it was almost 10, and the streets outside town looked like black rivers. I loaded up, slammed the hatch shut, and headed out. The first 20 minutes weren't too bad. The wipers fought the storm. The radio hummed weakly under the hiss of rain. But as the streets thinned, the lamps disappeared, and my GPS started to glitch. Recalculating, it droned again and again before going silent. I drove blind. The road narrowed, the asphalt cracked, and before I knew it, I was rolling past a leaning iron gate half eaten by vines. A sign swung overhead, the letters almost rubbed away. Hollow Creek. I'd heard the name before, a mining town that had died long before I was born, a place people whispered about, sinkholes, fires, an accident in the mines that had killed dozens. Some said it was cursed. I told myself it was just a detour, just a shortcut, just a road. Then I saw the cemetery. It sprawled along the left side of the road, crooked fences bending, headstones leaning like teeth. My headlights caught cracked marble angels with missing heads, and mausoleums where doors gaped open, black inside. That's when I saw the first one. A figure. A man in a long coat, standing just off the road, face white and blurred in the rain. His head turned slowly as my car passed, following me with eyes that glimmered too bright in the headlights. I shuddered and pressed the gas, but more came. A woman in a ragged dress, soaked and clinging, hair plastered over half her face. A child holding a doll whose head lolled to one side. A man whose jaw looked broken, hanging loose, skin sagging. They didn't move like people caught in a storm. They didn't hunch or shiver. They stood, still, staring. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it over the engine. I gripped the wheel until my hands hurt. "Just shadows," I whispered. "Just your eyes playing tricks." But I knew better, because when the road curved past the old miners' memorial, my headlights caught something dead center in the lane. A tall, skeletal figure, helmet rusted onto its head, one arm raised as if to stop me. In the other hand, it held a lantern, glowing faintly red. I slammed the brakes. The car fishtailed, tires screaming on wet pavement. For an instant, the lantern's light painted the interior blood red. And then, the figure was gone. I sat there gasping, the pizzas sliding in the passenger seat, the rain roaring. My headlights stabbed empty road. I wanted to turn back. God, I should have turned back. But I thought about the tip, about the cash, about how stupid I'd feel explaining to my boss that I'd bailed over shadows. So I kept going. A half-mile later, the car shuddered. A wet pop under the hood, a grinding rattle. Then the engine coughed and died. The headlights flickered once, twice, then cut out. I was left in blackness, the rain hammering on the roof, the storm howling like laughter through the cracks. For a long moment, I sat frozen, hands still on the wheel, telling myself it would start again. It didn't. When I finally worked up the nerve, I grabbed my phone. No signal. Not even a single bar. I tried the ignition again. Nothing but a choking whine. That's when I heard it. Not the rain, not the wind. Knuckles. Knocking. On the glass, right beside my face. I whipped my head around. Nothing. Only my own reflection blurred in the window. Another knock, this time on the other side. A sharp, deliberate rap. I fumbled for the lock switch, though I knew it wouldn't matter if someone wanted in bad enough. My breath came quick, fogging the inside of the windshield. Then something pressed against the glass. A hand, pale, dripping, the skin wrinkled and peeling like wet paper. Fingers too long, nails broken. It slid slowly downward, leaving streaks in the condensation. I screamed and scrambled across the seat, shoving the pizzas aside. The hand was gone when I dared look again. The rain filled the silence. I don't know how long I sat there shaking, every muscle tight, before I realized I couldn't stay. Not in the dead car, not with them circling. I shoved the door open, rain instantly soaking me, and staggered onto the road. The storm clawed at me, wind tearing at my jacket. I held my phone up like a torch, its faint glow barely piercing the dark. The cemetery loomed on one side, the skeletal remains of the ghost town on the other. Houses with windows like black eyes, door frames sagging, roofs caved in, and figures, dozens of them now, standing along the road, their outlines blurred by rain, watching me. I started walking. My sneakers splashed through puddles, my breath ragged. I didn't run. Something in me knew running would make them follow. Every step felt like a mile. The storm pushed me forward, figures shifting at the edges of the glow. A man missing half his face. A woman dragging a leg, the bone jutting white. A child with empty sockets where eyes should have been. They never moved closer, but they never left. At the edge of town, the road split. One way vanished into trees. The other dipped past the cemetery gates, yawning open like a mouth. My phone buzzed once in my hand, a single notification, no service. Then the screen went black. I heard laughter, high, thin, and wrong, coming from everywhere, from the graves, from the ruins, from inside my own skull. I ran then. I don't remember choosing to. I just remember the sickening weight of my legs pounding, my lungs burning, my heart exploding in my chest. I sprinted past the gates, past the leaning stones, past the angels with broken faces. Something moved in the trees. A flash of lantern light. A shadow pacing me. The laughter grew louder, a chorus now, dozens of voices shrieking and howling. Blood poured hot in my ears. My feet slipped on wet leaves, nearly throwing me down. Then, out of nowhere, a pair of headlights cut through the storm. A truck, an old Ford, barreling down the road, its engine roaring like salvation. I flung myself into the middle of the lane, waving my arms, screaming until my throat tore. The truck skidded, brakes squealing, horn blaring. It stopped inches from me. An old man leaned out the window, shouting. His words were lost in the rain, but his hand waved me forward. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself into the passenger seat, dripping, shaking, sobbing. When I dared to look back, the road was empty. No figures, no lantern light. Only the storm. The driver didn't ask questions. He just drove. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't force words out. I stared at my hands until I realized my palms were smeared with dirt. Fresh dirt. I never made that delivery. I never told my boss or anyone else what happened. I quit the pizza place the next week and left town not long after. But every Halloween, when the storm comes down hard, I still hear that laughter. I still see pale faces at the roadside when headlights sweep the dark. And I know one thing for certain. If that truck hadn't come when it did, I wouldn't be here telling you this. I'd be one of them. I still can't explain what happened that night. Maybe I never will. But it has stayed with me, burned into my brain like a scar. And since it happened on Halloween, I've never been able to enjoy the holiday again. It started innocently enough. I'd just met Rebecca a week earlier. We'd clicked fast, shared jokes, long talks, the kind of easy rhythm that made a first date on Halloween sound like a perfect idea. She suggested seeing the special re-release of Night of the Living Dead downtown. I was nervous but excited. I picked her up just after 6, and she looked amazing. simple black dress, orange scarf, her hair catching the glow of the porch light. We laughed in the car on the way over, joking about how Halloween was the perfect night for a first date. The streets were alive then, kids running door to door in costumes, parents trailing behind with umbrellas, the smell of smoke and damp leaves drifting in the air. Everything felt normal. The theater was buzzing too, packed with families and horror fans, the kind of people who wore vintage shirts and makeup like zombies. We bought popcorn, found our seats, and for 2 hours, I lost myself in the film. Rebecca gripped my arm during the tense moments, and I thought, yeah, this could be something real. But when the credits rolled and the lights came up, I realized something was wrong. The theater was empty. Not people had already shuffled out. Empty. Empty. No patrons, no workers, no ushers waiting to sweep the aisles. Just us. Rebecca laughed nervously. Guess everyone rushed out quick. Yeah, I said, but my voice cracked. Guess so. We walked out into the lobby. The concession stand lights glared against the polished counters, but there was no one there. No half-cleaned soda cups, no popcorn spilled from the rush of families leaving. Just spotless, humming silence. The box office was deserted too, cash drawers open, screens frozen on bright blue desktop backgrounds. The hum of fluorescent lights was the only sound. Rebecca's hand slipped into mine. Her palm was clammy. Where is everybody? I didn't answer. I pushed through the front doors instead, bracing for the noise of traffic, for shouts of kids, for the bass of parties carrying across the streets. There was nothing. Not a single car passing, not a single person walking. The sidewalks were littered with paper skeletons, fake cobwebs, a plastic pumpkin bucket tipped on its side, spilling candy across the cement. But there was no sound, no movement. The whole city felt dead. Rebecca squeezed my hand tighter. This isn't funny. I know, I said, scanning up and down the empty street. Let's just get to the car. We hurried across the parking lot. My car, a 2002 BMW I'd been proud of since I bought it used, sat where I'd left it, glistening with dew. We climbed in, the doors thumping too loudly in the silence. For a long moment, we sat there. Neither of us spoke. The engine purred, headlights stabbing into the emptiness. Finally, Rebecca whispered, "Take me home." So I did. We drove through streets that should have been choked with trick-or-treaters, parents, teenagers hanging out car windows, blasting music. But it was deserted. Every house still glowed with orange lights, jack-o'-lanterns grinning from porches, but no one came out of them. Curtains twitched in windows, but when I looked closer, there was nothing there. Street after street, mile after mile, nothing but emptiness. The rain began again, faint at first, then heavier, streaking the windshield. Rebecca sat stiff beside me, staring out into the dark, her reflection pale in the glass. Then we saw it. Headlights off the road, cutting into the ditch, a shape half hidden by trees. A wreck. Rebecca gasped and I pulled over. My tires crunched gravel, the wipers squeaking back and forth. The car in the ditch was a BMW. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. That's... I know. My voice cracked. Stay here. But she followed anyway. Together we stumbled down the embankment, shoes slipping in the wet grass. The wreck was bad. The front end crumpled into the trunk of a tree, the windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. Steam hissed from under the hood, and through the broken glass, I saw them. Me in the driver's seat, Rebecca in the passenger seat. Both of us. Still buckled in, heads slumped forward, blood streaked across our faces. My arm was twisted wrong against the wheel, Rebecca's hair soaked dark with blood at her temple. Dead. Rebecca screamed. I staggered back, stomach lurching, bile rising in my throat. My hands shook as I reached for her, half expecting her to dissolve when I touched her arm. But she was solid, warm, alive. We stumbled away from the wreck, back toward the road. The silence pressed heavier now, as though the whole world held its breath. Rebecca's voice shook. What does this mean? I don't know. Are we? She couldn't finish the word. I didn't answer. We got back in the car, my car, the one that was still running on the roadside, and drove in silence. Neither of us spoke the rest of the way. When I dropped her off at her apartment, she kissed my cheek like she was saying goodbye forever. I drove home alone, heart hammering, eyes darting to every shadow. I never saw Rebecca again. I never told anyone about that night, because every time I try, I think about the wrecked car, about my own broken face staring back at me through shattered glass, and I can't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we never left that ditch at all. Maybe we've been driving empty streets ever since.